welcome to another painting video. Today we're diving into some awesome Moonstone miniatures from the starter set. These Dominion minis are just bursting with character. We've got a goblin riding a pug, a streaking plague doctor goblin, and of course Grub. I mean, how could you not love Grub? He is literally a bug with bug spray. For this set, I went with a soft pastel dreamy vibe because the Moonstone game is set at night and I wanted to capture that in these miniatures. So, let's begin, shall we? After priming the models black, I jump in with the airbrush. I spray all the models with dark Jade. This is going to act as our shadow color and really sets the tone for the miniatures. For the goblins, I use a zenithal highlight with white blue. This gives us a perfect foundation for those pastel colors I'm going for. It'll make the goblin skin pop with that dreamy soft look. Now for Grub, I'm leaning into a more brown tinted palette. So I hit him with a zenithal of brown gray to establish those earthy tones. To enhance the details, I use a lighter zenithal of red-gray. Finally, to brighten things up even more, I add a zenithal of Baneblade Brown. For the Goblin Skin, I grabbed some pastel paints from AK Interactive. I start by base coating the skin with pastel green. It's a soft and subtle color that works great for this look. Next, I shade the skin with Croac Green. This is a subtle green wash that pairs really nicely with the pastel tones. I go back with pastel green, focusing only on the raised areas, leaving the shadows in the recesses. For highlights, I mix pastel blue and pastel yellow to create a bright light effect on the skin highest points. Then I blend up a mix of pastel pink and pastel peach, thinning it with a contrast medium. I apply this to spots like the knees, elbows and knuckles to give the skin some life. This creates a beautifully soft light green tone which sets the right amount of warmth. For the next part, I'm going to tackle some non-metallic metal, but with a fun cartoony twist. I'm aiming for a bold blue metal effect, moving from deep dark hues all the way up to bright white. I start off with Ahriman Blue as the base color. It's a rich dark blue that sets the perfect foundation for our metal effect. I lay this down evenly over the entire metal surface. Next, I grab Temple Garb Blue and start feathering it on. Instead of going for a smooth transition, I use a feathering technique to create texture on the metal. I leave the Ahriman Blue showing through in the deeper areas, giving that sense of shadow while building up to the brighter areas. Then I move to Baharroth Blue. I feather this on as well, focusing on the raised parts and the edges where light would naturally hit. The feathering technique gives the metal a slightly rough look while still allowing for that cartoony feel. For highlights, I switch to pastel blue, applying it with the same feathering technique. This adds sharpness and definition, especially along the edges and where the light would reflect the most. Finally, I use pure white paint for those extreme highlights. I focus on the very tips and the sharpest edges, feathering it in to give that reflective look. The white really pushes the contrast and makes the blue metal look like shiny comic book armor. Let's move on to everyone's favorite, Doug the Pug. For his beige fur, I start by laying down a base coat of Scrag Brown. This gives us a nice warm foundation to build on. Next, I highlight the fur with Deathclaw Brown. which adds some rich brownish tones that give the fur a bit more depth. From here I feather on Xandri dust to create that textured furry look, but I'm careful to leave some of the brown showing through in select areas for added variation. To keep building that fur texture, I layer on Ushabti bone, lightening things up while keeping the transitions natural. Then for the final highlight, I use Screaming Skull to bring out those brighter spots and make the fur pop. For the black areas of the puck, I start by base coating with Tenebrous Grey, giving us a solid dark base. Then I layer on Deep Grey to start building up the color. After that, I go with Uniform Grey, layering again to keep the black areas from looking flat. Finally, I highlight with Ash Grey to add a nice subtle sheen. Now on to Doug's big adorable eyes. I paint the eyes with Wraithbone as a base to set the stage. Then I add a glaze of Lamenter's Yellow to bring some warmth and life into them. After that, I layer on Palace Witch Flesh to restore the brightness of the whites of the eyes. For the pupils, I use Tenebrous Grey. I add tiny blood vessels using Blood Angel Red. And to finish off, I place a small dot of white paint on each eye for that light reflection, bringing Doug's gaze to life. Look how cute he is. Adorable. In this section, I'll be painting all the leather and wood details on the goblins using Dryad Bark as my main base color. Next, I'll apply a layer of Gorthor Brown to enhance the texture. And finally, I'll add highlights with Agrax Stone to bring out the details. Let's bring some vibrancy to the banners. We'll start with the red sections. For the base coat, I'm using Wild Rider Red. This shade provides a solid foundation for the banner. I'll add depth by shading with Berserker Bloodshade. This will enrich the red and create shadows that make the details stand out. Next, I'll layer on more Wild Rider Red to bring back that vibrant tone and smooth out the transitions. I'll follow up with a layer of Fire Dragon Bright. Finally, to make those highlights pop, I'll finish with Pastel Peach. Now let's move on to the yellow part of the banner. I start by base coating it with Jokero Orange. This rich orange will provide a solid foundation for our yellows. I'll layer with Dirty Yellow to add some depth and character to the color. Following that, I'll bring in Fleshgit's Yellow to brighten things up and add some vibrancy. To finish off this section, I highlight with Pastel Yellow. Next up, we're going to tackle Beaky Bobby's impressive big coat. For the base coat, I'll be using Steel Legion Drab. This earthy tone sets a solid foundation and captures the rugged look of the coat. I'll apply Agrax Earthshade to create shadows and enhance the depth of the fabric. After the wash has dried, I'll bring some brightness back to the coat with a layer of Xandri dust. This lighter tone will help to highlight the raised areas, ensuring that the coat doesn't look flat and lifeless. Finally, I'll finish with a highlight using Agrax Stone. The combination of these colors will make the coat look realistic. Let's move on to the feathers. To start, I'll add some Lamia medium on the feathers. This medium will help the colors flow smoothly and create a seamless blend. For the base of the feathers, I'm using Shyish Purple. This rich shade provides a striking foundation. Next, I'll paint the tips of the feathers with Frost Heart. As these are contrast paints, I want the colors to blend beautifully into each other, creating a smooth gradient effect that transitions from the deep purple at the base to the icy blue at the tips. Once that's dried, I'll highlight the feathers using Temple Guard Blue. This will add a bright touch to the edges. Following that, I'll bring in Baharroth Blue for a second highlight. Finally, I'll finish with a highlight of Pastel Blue. This last touch will really make the feathers pop, creating the ethereal look that ties everything together. I'm going to add some vibrant colors to the potion bottles adorning Beaky Bobby's coat. I'll start by base coating all the bottles with Pastel Blue. Next, I'll introduce some fluorescent paints to really make those potions pop. I'll begin with fluorescent turquoise, applying it to some of the bottles. Following that, I'll paint some of them with fluorescent yellow. Next up is fluorescent green. This will bring a fresh and energetic look to the potion bottles. Then I'll finish with fluorescent violet for the last of the bottles. For the highlights, I'll mix white paint into each of the fluorescent colors. I start with a mix of fluorescent turquoise and white to create a bright highlight for the turquoise bottles. Next, I'll prepare a mix of fluorescent yellow and white paint. Then I'll move on to fluorescent green and a white paint mix, adding brightness to the green bottles. Following that, I'll highlight the fluorescent violet with a mix of fluorescent violet and white paint. Finally, I'll add a small dot of pure white to the tops of each of the potion bottles to simulate the light reflecting off the glass. Let's move on to the chopped off hand, giving it a suitably grim appearance. I'll start by base coating it with Cadian Fleshtone. I'll shade with Targor Shade. This deep wash will cool down the Fleshtone, making it appear more sickly and lifeless. After that, I'll layer on Agrax Skin. This step will further discolor the skin, shifting it in a more deadened tone. Next, I'll highlight with Deepkin Flesh to accentuate the raised areas, creating depth while maintaining that pallid look. Finally, to add some realism and suggest bruising, I'll apply Berserker Bloodshade to select areas. Let's dive into painting some non-metallic copper. I start with a base coat of Rhinox Hide. This dark, rich tone will serve as a foundation for our copper. I mix Rhinox Hide with Deepkin Flesh. This blend will add a warm undertone to the copper while maintaining the darker base color. Next, I'll create a lighter mixture of Rhinox Hide and Deepkin Flesh at a 1:2 ratio. This will further lighten the color and begin to establish that shiny quality characteristic of copper. After that, I apply pure Deepkin Flesh. This will add vibrancy and richness, enhancing the overall copper effect. Now it's time to highlight. I'll mix Deepkin Flesh and white paint to create a soft highlight. This mixture will allow me to build up to the brightest areas without losing the warmth of the copper. Following that, I'll create another highlight using a mix of Deepkin Flesh and white paint at a 1:2 ratio. This will further lighten the color while keeping it grounded in the copper palette. Finally, I apply pure white to the very edges and erased areas. The last highlight will create a striking contrast, giving the non-metallic copper a reflective finish. Now let's bring Grub to life by painting his unique bug-like skin with an icky and gross look. I'll start with a base coat of Cadian Fleshtone. This warm tone provides a solid foundation. Next, I layer on Deathclaw Flesh. This shade will add brightness to the skin. Next, I use Flayed Flesh to further lighten the skin and create a sickly pallor. To give Grub that icky feel, I'll mix Plaguebearer Flesh with Lamia Medium. This combination will create a translucent wash that adds a slimy greenish hue, enhancing the bug-like nature of Grub and making the skin appear more repulsive. After that, I'll highlight the skin with a mix of Deathclaw Flesh and Dorn Yellow. This will bring out some sickly brightness, making Grub's skin look more vibrant in a way that feels off-putting and grotesque. Finally, I use a blend of Flayed Flesh and Dorn Yellow for the last highlights. This mixture will add brightness to the raised areas, ensuring Grub's skin has a repulsive and unsettling finish. Let's have a look at Grub's shell, which I'll paint in warm tones of brown with vibrant hints of orange and yellow. I start with a base coat of Baneblade Brown. And I shade with non-oil. Next, I layer on a molten lava. This bright warm color will be the start of our highlights. Following that, I apply a lava orange to intensify the warmth of the highlight. Then I'll introduce Glowing Inferno for a vibrant highlight. This shade will add a fiery glow. Finally, I finish with Dorn Yellow. This bright highlight will be applied to most prominent areas, giving the shell a radiant finish that enhances the overall warmth and giving it an inviting, yet slightly unsettling appearance. Now let's turn our attention to Grub's whimsical pointy wizard hat. I start with a base coat of Ahriman Blue. This deep rich blue provides a fantastic foundation for the hat. Next, I shade the hat with Athonian Camoshade. This wash will deepen the color and add a greenish hue. Next, I layer on a mix of Ahriman Blue and Templegar Blue. This mix will lighten that blue while maintaining the richness. After that, I apply a mix of Templegar Blue and Ice Yellow for the final highlights. This combination will bring a bright, lively touch to the edges of the hat. Let's give Grub some character by painting his eyes. I start with a base coat of Wraithbone. This off-white color provides a perfect foundation for the vibrant orange that's about to come. Once the base coat is dry, I'll paint the eyes with Gryph-hound Orange. This bright hue will make Grub's eyes pop. Next, I'll highlight the eyes with Flickering Flame. This fiery orange will add a shiny highlight. I'll finish the eyes with a final highlight of Ice Yellow. This will bring a bright, almost glowing quality to the eyes, making them stand out even more. Now let's move on to Grub's beak. I think it's a beak. I'll begin with a base coat of Stegadon Scale Green. Next, I'll layer on Thunderhawk Blue, and this will add depth and a cool tone to the beak. Finally, I'll highlight the beak with Farisian Grey. For the wings on Grub's back, I'll paint them with Aethermatic Blue. This vibrant blue will really stand out on the brown shell. For the base, I spray everything with a green-blue shade. This will set a foundation for the midnight blue base, creating depth and a moody ambiance. For the first layer, I add fluorescent blue using my airbrush. This vibrant color will create a striking contrast against the dark undertones, giving the base almost a magical glow. Next, I begin the dry brushing process. First, I dry brush with Seborite Green. This will add texture and a subtle green tint. Following that, I'll move on to Ghost Blaster Green for the next layer of dry brushing. This brighter shade will highlight the raised areas, bringing more life to the surface. Finally, I dry brush with Skarsnik Green. This final layer will add a fresh, vibrant touch that helps tie the color palette together. To complete the base, I paint the rim with Corvus Black. This will provide a clean, finished look. And here we have my first Dominion troop for Moonstone. I really enjoy these goblins and I can't wait to expand my collection with the pirate goblins and all the different trolls. I always strive to make each model special with this unique base to help them stand out a little bit more. Join me next time when I will tackle my first Dominion troll, Boulder. This model is my daughter's favorite and she'll be making the color choices, so I'm really curious what she'll come up with. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram where I post pictures of my current projects and share some behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.